Let's do a little logical exercise. We're going to walk through 2 logical exercises using pure reasoning. No appeals to papal authority, no reliance on the syllabus of errors, just simple deductive logic. First, we will demonstrate that universalism is necessarily heretical. Second, we will demonstrate that believing in broad salvation, that most people are saved, is also necessarily heretical. Let's begin. Logical exercise 1. Universalism is necessarily heretical. Step 1. The Church teaches that some are saved and some are lost. Christ explicitly says that few are saved and many are lost, Matthew 7:13-14. The Church has always taught that some go to heaven and some go to hell. Therefore, if you believe that all are saved, universalism, you deny a core truth of Christianity. Step 2. If universalism is true, the sacraments are unnecessary. Baptism was instituted for the forgiveness of sins, Acts 2:38. Confession was instituted for the forgiveness of post-baptismal mortal sin, John 20:23. Viaticum, last rites, was instituted for final preparation before judgment, James 5:14-15. If all people go to heaven, then these sacraments do not serve their primary purpose. If the sacraments do not serve their purpose, then Christ established unnecessary rituals. Step 3. If universalism is true, the Church's mission is meaningless. Christ commanded the apostles to go and make disciples of all nations, Matthew 28:19. If everyone is already saved, then this mission is pointless. If universalism is true, then Christianity has no purpose. A Universalist Catholic is a contradiction. They belong to a religion that exists for no reason. Step 4. Universalism directly contradicts defined Catholic teaching. The Council of Trent declared that confession is necessary for salvation. The Church has always taught that outside of the Church there is no salvation. Universalism rejects these truths. If you reject the necessity of sacraments and the reality of hell, you reject Catholicism itself. Conclusion: Universalism equals heresy. Universalism denies Christ's words. Universalism denies the necessity of the sacraments. Universalism denies the mission of the Church. Universalism is, therefore, a direct contradiction to Christianity. If you believe in universalism, you are a heretic by definition. Logical exercise 2. Even believing that many are saved is heretical. Now we take it one step further. Let's assume someone rejects universalism, but still believes that most people are saved. We will now demonstrate why even this belief is heretical. Step 1. The Church has always taught that salvation is rare. Christ said that few are saved, Matthew 7:13-14. The Church Fathers consistently taught that most people go to hell. The Council of Trent anathematized anyone who denies the necessity of confession for salvation. If you believe most are saved, you deny the clear historical teachings of the Church. Step 2. If many are saved, then the sacraments are not necessary. The Church teaches that baptism is necessary for salvation, John 3:5. The Church teaches that confession is necessary if one commits mortal sin, Trent, Session 14, Canon 6. Most people are not baptized. Most Catholics do not go to confession. If most are saved despite not receiving the sacraments, then the sacraments are unnecessary. If the sacraments are unnecessary, then the Church's sacramental system is false. Step 3. If many are saved, then sin has no consequence. If confession is necessary, but most people never go, then most people are in mortal sin. The Church teaches that dying in mortal sin equals hell. Council of Florence, 1439. Yet most priests do not act as if their congregations are in danger. If most are saved, then mortal sin does not actually send people to hell. But if mortal sin doesn't send people to hell, then Catholicism is false. Step 4. If many are saved, Christ's warning is false. Christ said the road to destruction is broad, and many enter it. Matthew 7:13. If most people are actually saved, then Christ was wrong. If Christ was wrong, then Christianity is false. If Christianity is true, then most people are lost. There is no way around this. Either Christ was lying, or most people are damned. Final conclusion. Universalists and broad salvation believers are heretics. If you believe in universalism, you are a heretic. If you believe in broad salvation, you are also a heretic. The only logical, consistent Catholic position is that few are saved. Matthew 7:13-14. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and few find it. Modern Catholicism is filled with heretics who reject this truth. Let's follow a step-by-step path for the logical deduction that people who believe most are saved are heretics. Premise 1. The Church teaches that confession is necessary for salvation if one commits mortal sin. Trent, Session 14. Premise 2. Most Catholics do not go to confession regularly. Premise 3. If most Catholics are saved despite this, then confession is unnecessary for salvation. Step 4. If confession is unnecessary, then the Church's doctrine on mortal sin is false. Premise 5. If the Church's doctrine on mortal sin is false, then the Church is false. Conclusion. If the Church is true, then most people are not saved. No escape. Either Catholic doctrine is false or salvation is rare. How this crisis is visible in the Church. Heresy is not just a private belief. It is something that manifests outwardly in action, attitude, and affect. The widespread material heresy of modern Catholic clergy and laity is not just an intellectual issue. It is something you can see, feel, and recognize in their behavior. Let's examine how this manifests and what that means for the faithful. 1. How this heresy manifests in clergy and laity. Heresy is not just about rejecting doctrine, it is about rejecting the urgency and supernatural reality behind the doctrine. The modern Catholic attitude towards the sacraments shows that most people, including clergy, do not believe in them or their effects. If a priest truly believed that confession is necessary for salvation, he would preach confession constantly. If a priest truly believed that mortal sin damns a soul to hell, he would warn people forcefully. But instead, priests never warn about hell or the need for confession. What does this tell us? They do not believe confession is necessary. They do not believe mortal sin damns souls. They do not believe in urgency. They show their unbelief through their silence. Ezekiel 33:6. If the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the trumpet, and the people are not warned, and the sword comes and takes any of them, that person is taken away in his iniquity, but his blood I will require of the watchman's hand. These priests will be held accountable for their silence. The signs of this attitude. The sacraments are spoken of as gifts for Catholics rather than necessities for salvation. Encouragement to receive sacraments is given, but never warnings about hell if you don't. The sacraments are treated as nice traditions rather than supernatural lifelines. If priests truly believed the sacraments were necessary, they would speak with urgency, not casual encouragement. Instead, the sacraments are spoken of as optional, meaningful rituals that enhance Catholic life. 1 Corinthians 9:16, "Woe to me if I do not preach the gospel." Their behavior proves that they do not believe. The faithful take on the attitude of the clergy. Signs of heresy in the laity. Apathy towards sin. People commit mortal sin casually because they have no fear of hell. Casual approach to confession. Most Catholics rarely confess because they do not believe it is necessary. Mass as a social event. People chat before Mass, dress casually, and treat it as a gathering rather than a supernatural sacrifice. Indifference towards evangelization. Most Catholics see no urgency in bringing others to the faith. If most Catholics believed in the faith, they would act differently. Instead, their actions show they do not believe in the supernatural reality of the sacraments or salvation. James 2:17. Faith without works is dead. They do not act as if they believe because they don't. Understanding the level of heresy is important to know where we stand in this crisis. When someone holds a heretical belief out of ignorance but does not willfully reject church teaching, they are a material heretic. Most Catholics and clergy today are material heretics. They do not know the faith, and they do not know they are rejecting it. This is still grave error, but they may not be fully culpable. Second, manifest heresy. When a heresy is visible and expressed publicly, it is manifest, even if the person does not realize it. The modern church is filled with manifest heresy. Most priests and bishops manifest heresy by their silence, their lack of urgency, and their dismissal of Catholic doctrine. Their actions reveal they are heretics in belief, even if they do not openly declare them. Formal heresy. When someone knows the church's teachings, is given a warning, and still willfully rejects it. Formal heretics are consciously rejecting the faith and are automatically excommunicated. Most clergy today are material or manifest heretics, but few are formal heretics because the church never corrects them. Can the faithful issue a warning? The church normally requires clergy to give an official warning before a heresy is considered formal. However, since the church itself refuses to act, what happens when the faithful warns someone? If they reject the teaching after correction, they are knowingly embracing heresy. If they persist in their rejection, they are functionally in formal heresy. However, only the church can officially declare them a formal heretic. But what happens when the church refuses to do so? Then we enter the unprecedented crisis we are living in now, where heretics remain in power everywhere and no official condemnation comes. 2 Thessalonians 2:3. Let no one deceive you in any way, for that day will come unless the rebellion comes first, and the man of lawlessness is revealed. This is the great apostasy in action. What does this mean for the faithful? Do not be deceived by the majority. Most Catholics today are heretics. This does not mean the church is false. The faithful remnant must stand firm even when the majority is lost. Romans 11:5. So too at the present time there is a remnant chosen by grace. If you see the crisis, you are part of the remnant. Hold to the sacraments and the teachings of the saints. Continue receiving the sacraments. Validity is not affected by the priest's heresy. Read the early church fathers, Trent, the traditional catechisms, and remain rooted in true Catholic doctrine. 2 Timothy 3:14. Continue in what you have learned and have firmly believed, knowing from whom you learned it. The clergy may fail, but Christ's promises do not. Evangelize and prepare. The modern Catholic Church is failing in its mission. It falls to the faithful remnant to bring the truth to others. Do not expect leadership to correct this. Prepare for more crisis. Matthew 24:13. But the one who perseveres to the end will be saved. Do not be shaken. This is the time to stand firm. This is a test of faith. This is the greatest crisis in the history of the church. Heresy is widespread. The leadership is silent. The faithful remnant is small. But Christ remains with his church, Matthew 28:20. And behold, I am with you always to the end of the age. The exception swallows the rule fallacy. The church acknowledges rare exceptions like baptism of desire and martyrdom, but they were always treated as exceptions. The moment someone uses them to justify the idea that most people are saved, they are not treating them as exceptions anymore. They've swallowed the rule. It's like saying, well, technically you can live without your heart for a few minutes if machines take over. Therefore, hearts are optional. The invincible ignorance claim does the same thing. Instead of recognizing that a handful may be saved in this state, it is now used to imply that most of humanity is actually better off remaining ignorant of the gospel, which brings us to the self-destructive logic of broad, invincible ignorance. This is the key point. If invincible ignorance is the best path to salvation, then the gospel is dangerous. Let that sink in. Christ came to earth to preach salvation, but under the invincible ignorance logic, people are better off not hearing him. If that's true, then the incarnation, the cross, and the Great Commission were not acts of mercy, but stumbling blocks. That's not just absurd, that's blasphemous. And this is neo-modernism in action. When people claim this argument, they accept the emotional or relational weight of the logic of the argument that most are lost. Wow, this argument is airtight. But rather than abandoning the position that most are saved, they reach for a theological footnote and stretch it until it replaces the entire principle. This allows them to stay Catholic while rejecting what the church actually teaches. And that is neo-modernism. It wears the outer garment of orthodoxy while believing something else entirely underneath. Christ did not preach invincible ignorance. And this is the final crushing refutation. Christ did not say, go into all the world and don't disrupt people who might be saved by their ignorance. He said, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved. Whoever does not believe will be condemned. He came into the world as a light, not as a shadow, to preserve ignorance. So this is a lie from the pit of hell.